Oh man, that's a bummer. So all of our clients are associated with U of C. This is departments, grad programs, research initiatives, museums. All of those types of organizations can contract with us to create web projects for them. Other things that we've done, we designed and built uchicago.edu, which we won a Webby for a couple years ago. We have a Drupal as a service offering thing that we do. We call it Templetron. We love Templetron. We have about 400 multi-site instances of Templetron running right now, I think. Yeah. So that's good for our clients who have lower cost. So maybe you're wondering, why am I up here saying all of this stuff to you? Where is all of this going? And who let this random person in here? She doesn't really know like she looks what she's talking about. You're right. But somehow, in some way, I basically designed my department's design process over again over the past year, and my department was crazy and they let me. And I'm going to share my experience with you in the hopes that you can get something out of it. So this is for anyone that's interested in design methodology. It's for anyone who's interested in process change. It's specifically for anyone who is really, really pissed off about something at work and can't stand it anymore. If that's you, like, yes. And I'm very unapologetic about this. That's actually the whole point of this talk. If you want to leave now, that's fine. So how I did it. Before I get into that, I want to know how many of you guys have tried something like this before at work. Yes, you have, Michael. So how many, can you guys raise your hands again? What's that, like 10, 12, 15? I can't count. Haha, what are numbers? I don't know. Several people, right? It's hard. It's really hard. Did anyone actually have success in this? Only 2 hands, and one was kind of like a maybe shaky hand. It's really hard unless you're in a part of your organization in a rank where you have the authority or like you're in charge of it. It's not easy. It's really not easy. But I'll tell you how it worked out for me. So I'm a millennial. This is me. This is yesterday. My phone is right here. If I wasn't talking to you, I would be taking a selfie right now. And you think I'm joking, and I'm not joking. But I'm a millennial, so stereotypically I love to change things. I love nothing more than to waltz into a room where I don't know really anything about anything and just change everything. And usually people love me a lot, and no one ever gets annoyed by me, so that works out really well. I'm just kidding. By the way, I'm really sarcastic. So you've probably read an article like this before. If you're a manager, you've probably read more than one article like this. If you're a millennial and you're really neurotic, you've probably read more than 100 articles like this. You might have also read a similar article about snake people. How many people have heard of the Google Chrome extension, snake people replacing millennials? Yes. Okay. Everyone go get it. It will make your life better. So, but seriously, the point that I'm trying to make here, and this is one of the many ways that I fit this stereotype, is that if things suck in my workplace, I can't just let them continue to suck. I have to make them better, or I'm going to go somewhere else. And that's what all the articles say about me, and it's true. And that's what I did. So at the time when we were first changing the process, I was fairly new to our department. I was fresh enough to imagine how things could be different, but I was also experienced enough. I'd been there for a few years. I'd been through, I think, maybe 4 or 5 design projects, so I knew what things weren't working for us. I was also able to use my forked tongue to sniff out the fear of my enemies, which was very useful in manipulating people. But most of all, I was really, really passionate, and I made a really, really good case for what I wanted, which was a sane design process. So, like I said, we have 25 people in our department. This breakdown is probably not interesting to you, but what might be interesting to you is that we still use waterfall. And this is important later. When I think of waterfall, I think of this clip. Oh no. Play, you thing. I'm going to face it toward you. It's really important that you see this.
You're right, Peter!
Alan? What is that?
It's a crocodile in their house. Their house has flooded and split in two, and now there are stampedes of animals going through it because they're using waterfall, and they should never do that. But anyway, I digress. So, our old design process, my speaker notes here say, I'm not going to walk you through this. It's pretty boring. The only thing I need you to know is that it was complicated, and that the main point of this that we changed is that we used to have 3 designers each create a mock-up that we would present to a client. The client would then pick one of the mock-ups from the 3. We would have 3 designers each spending 25 hours on one mock-up, so that's 75 hours of work. We would also have a design lead, a separate person, interfacing between the team of designers and the client, also spending around 25 hours. A lot of times these projects would go over budget. Yeah, I'm seeing some people being like, ooh, and that's right, that's the right reaction. So yeah, the cons, we spent a lot of money, we spent a lot of time. Design was happening in a vacuum. Clients' ideas were getting lost in translation when they were getting communicated to like 4 different people. This happened. These are more words, and by the sheer amount of words on this slide, you should be able to tell that this was really, really bloated and terrible. Designing in a vacuum, I think, is one of the main things that we wanted to eradicate. We would go away for like 2 weeks and come back with a fully fledged mock-up and expect the client to like it and accept it. And I can probably count on 0 hands the amount of times that's happened that they liked it. So let's say that you're the client and I say, hey, I have 3 designs for you. And you're like, okay, all of them I hate. What do? You can't pay us more money. We already spent so much time working on this stuff. You probably don't even really trust us to give you what you want anymore. So there was just a big disconnect from that, a lot of dissatisfaction. And then as designers, we don't feel good about that either. Why are we doing this if no one's happy with it? So let me walk you through how client requirements got communicated. That first line repeating is not a mistake. The client would give the design requirements to the design lead, who would communicate the design requirements to 3 separate designers, who would then return mock-ups to the design lead, who would then go back to the client and present the designer's designs to the client. Then the client would give feedback back to the design lead. And I will stop there, but you can imagine how this goes. Some pros, I guess I have to be fair to this old process. Like, I guess it was fun to have a contest, kind of. I was fishing for that one. So our new process, we only have 1 designer now, and the designer is there at the beginning of the project. So during, not early enough during discovery, but basically during our def and doc phase, which is where we get all the client requirements for what they want, the designer's there, they're in the loop. And when we think we know enough about the requirements to move forward into design, then the designer takes over for a few weeks, just 1 person. And now we work one-on-one with the client in iterative hands-on sessions. So this can either be, I come to a client with a really, really lo-fi, like a gray box mock-up, and they say, oh, okay, I can see that this is only supposed to communicate layout. Now we will have a discussion about layout, and now I will not tell you that your logo needs to be 5 times bigger because I'm focusing on these specific things. And a lot of times this has been hit or miss, but we tried working with people in person in Photoshop. So like, I'm projecting Photoshop to the client, and so if they're like, well, what would it take for us to make the font red and larger? I can do it right there in like 5 seconds, or I could do it in like browser tools, and if it was a static prototype, and they can see that it's a terrible idea. Or if it's a great idea, and then I can change my mind. But in either case, we're collaborating, and they're building some ownership there. They're making decisions. They're involved from the beginning. It's also a good way for like the client and the designer to trust each other's expertise, right? So if I'm the designer, I know about designing websites. The client probably doesn't. They can trust me. I don't know anything usually about the client's business, or not nearly as much as they would. So we build kind of this rapport and this working relationship, rather than just throwing a mock-up at them and hoping that they like it. So then it gets approved. Pros, cost less money and time. We've been able to do designs in like 25 or 30 hours now, as opposed to 100 hours. That's ridiculous. We were just like, okay, now let's make this cheaper. And then we did it. But you would be surprised how hard it was. You can read all of these words, so I will not say them. But it's really improved the designer's morale, and that's really important. Not that we should all love our jobs all the time, but you can see the comparison here, how the numbers are a little bit better. Talked about that. Oh, I didn't talk about this. So, how many of you guys are designers? Okay, a couple people. How many of you guys have gone back and forth in emails with people, with them asking you to tweak like very small details, and you've spent like an hour responding about why you shouldn't tweak a small detail? That can happen in like 5 seconds if you rethink the way that you work with people. So anyway, not everyone's happy with this. Some clients get exhausted by it. Not all of our process overall has changed with the design process, so that there's kind of been some mismatch there. That's enough background, because I think you guys would rather get to how to do this, why you might want to do this. Let's see if I can explain it to you in a way that will be convincing. I don't know. You just got to figure it out for yourself. I'm kind of joking. The way that we started this change is by complaining. So, complaining turned into an idea dump. I condensed it into a much shorter Google Doc. I identified how the main points emerged, how they related to one another. I talked to my peers about it. We drafted up some concrete changes based on what we had talked about. And then I wrote out a whole bunch of counter-arguments. Any possible thing that anyone could possibly say against what we had come up with, I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to be prepared for every possible naysaying comment because of my lack of tenure in the department. I've only been there for 3 years, 2 years at this time, basically. Because of my age, because of my gender, I was really ready to be doubted. And that worked to my advantage. So, one of the worst things that someone's ever said to me in the workplace was this sentence: we shouldn't try something just because it's shiny and new. Can you imagine if you have spent several months thinking about all of the possible ways that you could improve your process, for someone to shoot it down with one sentence? That's what this was. And if I could get that person to understand that it's not just because it's shiny and new, and it's not just because I love to change things, because I'm a millennial snake person, but that it needs to be done, and we will fail without making this choice, I would be really satisfied. It hasn't happened yet, but maybe someday it will. So I became kind of this tireless defender of the new design process, right? I was obsessed with it. And anyway, we brought the new process up the ranks of our department. We built the audience as we went, so that by the time it hit management, a lot of people are already on board with it. So they would be kind of stupid to ignore what the actual people who are building the products are saying. So here's some tips for you guys in case you want to do something like this, which I encourage you to do. Number 1, get people angry and then use that energy for good. Number 2, if possible, get people angry on work time. So, how many of you guys have gone to lunch and complained about someone or something in your office? Raise your hand. Everybody's friends, it's okay. That's easily like a majority of the people in here. A lot of like very hesitant hand raising, but like I'm raising my hand up to here. How many of you guys have done the same thing, complained about something or someone on work time, like in a meeting? That's good. How many of you guys were able to take actionable steps to improve that because you were in a work environment? Kinda. Yeah. So here's the thing, right? If you're going to like Starbucks and complaining and venting, when you come back to the office, what have you gained? What has come out of it? You might feel a little better until the next time it happens. People need structured time in their work days to think about nothing, to give them headspace for fixing problems. If any of you guys are managers, please burn this into your brains. I read a book recently, it's called Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown, and he talks about this. At Google, they have, not that I would know, I've never worked there, but they have scheduled times when employees have meetings that literally are nothing. Like they're not allowed to do anything, they're not allowed to work in anything, nothing. How are you supposed to think about the bigger picture and the bigger problems in your organization, in the way that you do work, if you are always doing work? At my office, we have a front-end developer meeting. I think there are 5 of us. Every week on Friday for 1 hour, the front-end developers get together and share the latest technologies and methods for front-end development. This is actually how we came up with the new design process. It's like me and like 2 other guys sitting at a table, all venting, like all getting ready to quit. And I said, why don't we just do something about this? And then we did. And here we are. Number 3, get a few people, the right people on your side. So that one's important. You need, like I said, we built our argument slowly from the bottom up. By the time it got to a place where it was gaining more traction, oh no. Come back. Well, yeah, sorry, my HDMI is like very finicky in general. So, where was I? Yeah, so if you get a couple people, I read an article online that calls them allies. You can bounce ideas off of each other. You form a smaller group. You have a listening ear. If you have like a really paranoid thing for some reason about your idea, they can help you realize whether or not it's right to be paranoid about it. But these need to be the right people. So in my case, it was like a couple of developers. That's really important. Equally as important, select your audience wisely. So maybe you have a really cool idea and it's great and it would fix everything. But is who you're talking to about this idea the right person? Is this the right time to talk about this idea for your organization, giving other stuff that you might be dealing with? Are people ready for it right now? Are you ready for it? So my roommate works in advertising as a copywriter, and ad agencies actually, believe it or not, have finalized copy before they design anything. Some of them do. That blew my mind. We talked about it over drinks, and the next day at work, I brought it up with my coworkers. I was like, what if the clients gave us all of our content instead of after we gave them a Drupal site and they just put in random content? That's terrible. What if we wrote content with or for them before we designed anything? What would that be like? And everyone was like, well, that's ridiculous. Like, we can't even get clients to give us content as it is. Like, how are they even going to contract with us ever if we ask for it up front? And I was like, well, I don't know. It wasn't the right time. I wasn't prepared to defend it. Nobody cared. People shot it down. There were bigger fish to fry. And I knew that it was half-baked at the time. So I let it go because I knew what it would take to change that. And I hadn't done the right work. I hadn't done the prep. So I let it go for the time being. 5, always listen to criticism. And if it's relevant, do the thing. I've said that every one is important, but this is really important. So every process needs room to grow and improve when it first starts out. And the only way that we can figure out how to improve it is if we give it a test drive, right? But it's a little painful. Maybe it doesn't work right away. Maybe there's parts of it that are obviously not developed well or are the wrong decision, and that's fine. You wouldn't know how it's weak if you didn't give it a try first. The most important sentence, by the way, or word in the sentence is listen. A good technique for listening to people is called the 5 whys. Have you heard of the 5 whys? This is practical, by the way. This, if one thing is practical, it's this. 5 whys. if you want to ask someone how they're really feeling, and they can't tell you and they don't know how, you can keep asking them why. Eventually, you'll get to the heart of the issue, you'll get to something that's bothering them, you'll get to a feeling. Maybe they're scared of change, maybe they're upset with something in particular. If you want to know more about this, if you don't already, look it up. It's really, really effective. But it's really important to keep yourself humble about your own process and be willing to hear criticism and be seeking out criticism. If you don't listen to people, you won't know if what you're doing is working. And if it's not working, you shouldn't do it. Uber Pool, by the way, just a side note, is one of the processes that needs room to grow. If you used it, you know what I'm talking about. Number 6, take ownership even if you're exhausted. It is exhausting to be the person that someone comes to and asks about the new design process. But that's too bad, because you always have to be able to defend it and answer questions. You have to. And number 7, don't forget that we're all just people. So what I found that I was surprised by is that a lot of people were scared by change because their jobs might not be relevant anymore. The work that they do might not be relevant anymore after you change your process. The process might introduce risk. People are scared, but it's part of your job to assure them that they don't have to be scared. So in conclusion, our process is still changing. And what's next for us is refining this process and the other parts of our process, just like we did design. People have seen that change is possible in our department, and that is huge. We have people that have worked in our department for like 10 years. That seems like a long time to me. Some of you guys are like, okay, but they've been doing things for all that time the same way, and it's just, I don't know. I think people maybe got a little bit of hope, a glimmer, hopefully, after we changed the design process. And the last thing I will read to you. Your organization is probably different than my department. You might have your own special flavors of bureaucracy or egotism to deal with, but that's normal. Don't let that discourage you. What I want you to get out of this talk is the whys, most of all, not the hows. If you get those, that's great, but it's the bigger picture that matters, the vision of what your organization could be. If you're really committed to that vision, people will start to notice and your influence will grow. But it takes time, and you have to be unwavering. But if you stop at nothing, you can make a difference. You can make things better for yourself, your coworkers, your clients, designers, developers, PMs, project managers. They're the same thing. Or you can leave. You can always leave. But you should roll with the changes. Get it? Thank you. Go to the sprints. Sprints are awesome on Sunday. Go to the sprints. I don't care who you are. Be there. And if you want to give me feedback, please do. It takes like 1 minute. This is the link. Thanks again. Do you have any questions for me? We have like 2 minutes left. Didn't leave any time, but. Sure.
How did if you're interacting with the clients one-on-one now, where did the involvement of your creative director overlord come into play in that?
So, did everyone hear the question? Yes, if we're interacting with clients one-on-one, how did we get that approved by like our creative overlord? Was the word you used?
I did, yes.
Perhaps appropriate. We still have a phase built into the new design process where it goes through approval by our creative lead on our team, and also we run it by like the university branding guy who left now, so we kind of don't do that anymore.
What?
But that's a fluke. Yeah. So it's not that we are able to just shirk all of our process. It's not total chaos. But we re-examined everything, restructured things to the way that they need to be.
Where did it fit in the process with the clients? I mean, were they involved during that ongoing review, or was it after the client had semi-approved?
It's after it's semi-approved.
Okay.
We have a pretty solid idea of branding guidelines for the university. It's just, if it was somewhere different, we would probably have tailored something to our needs, but yeah.
Thanks.
And do you keep the competitive aspect, the one aspect that you liked about that in the new design process?
We still show our designs at the front of developer meetings. Like, there's maybe 5 minutes of showing things and then like 45 minutes of complaining. So it's still, we still bounce ideas off of our peers. We're a pretty critical bunch. So I'm still like very dependent on the validation of my peers. Not in general, totally not in general, but definitely for work. But yeah, the contest thing is weird. It's like, I'm not sure like, if that's where you want there to be competition on your team. You know, like it wasn't making the work better. If that makes sense. Answer your question.
It does. Did you end up taking on more work because you had 3 people working in parallel as opposed to 3 working on the
No,
same
we
thing?
didn't. Not to my knowledge.
No, but I mean, like, you have better throughput, right? Because 3 people are working on 3 separate things instead of 1 thing at the same time.
Oh, yeah, but that hasn't increased the quantity of things that we take on in any given time. It's just, it's more efficient way to use the resources that we have. And we're pretty small staff, so maybe actually, yeah. I'm contradicting myself.
No problem.
You could work on more things serially.
Yes, yeah. Well, because we balance projects, like, we can balance like 4-ish, whatever projects at a time. So you could be a designer and working on 2 different designs at the same time, and then they kind of like start to look like each other, and then you, voila, terrible. So, but one benefit of this is it allowed us to get the designs finished in a much smaller amount of time. So like maybe 2 or 3 weeks potentially, as opposed to like 6 or 7 weeks total. And so that limits the amount of like concurrent designs that you could be working on. Just how things work out, I guess. Anybody else? I think I'm rolling over to the next slide. Thanks, guys.
That's all done.
Huh? Thanks.